Na CCXP desse ano eu tive o prazer de ver o Roy Thomas, o criador do Wolverine, da Carol Danvers, do Ultron, Luke Cage, o Motoqueiro Fantasma, Visão e muitos outros personagens, falar sobre como foi o processo de criação do Wolverine, como era trabalhar com o Stan Lee. Ele falou até sobre o Hugh Jackman no papel do Wolverine e eu vou mostrar isso pra vocês agora.
And the first superhero series I really got as a regular thing was X-Men. Back when it was one of the least popular Marvel comics. It's a long time ago. Yeah. The most important character I guess I ever worked with, I didn't think at the time, of course, was Wolverine. You know, but we were in Canada a few weeks ago, and several people came up to me and asked me the question I had never thought of. Said, well, how did Wolverine end up being a Canadian? And I told him it's exactly the opposite. What came first was Canada. I thought we had 5-10% of our readers would probably be in Canada, you know, right across the border. So I said, we didn't have one character that's Canadian, you know. And so I called Glenn Wayne, who was writing the Hulk, and I said, I want a character called, he's Canadian, and he's called Wolverine, because that's an animal. I can't call him the Moose, that's kind of silly. So I said, can go Wolverine. And I said, he's short, you know. I'm sorry, Hugh Jackman's a little too tall to play Wolverine, but otherwise he's pretty good. Otherwise he's good. And he's very mean because Wolverine from that animal is 10-20 times her size. And then I gave him to Glenn, and I also gave the assignment to John Romita, whose son John Romita Jr., an equally great artist, who's here at the convention, wonderful stuff. And John designed this wonderful costume with claws and everything. And then Glenn wrote the story in the hall. You know, and he added his part to it. And I never wrote Wolverine back in those days. If I'd known what Wolverine was such a big deal, I'd have kicked Glenn off the Hulk for 1 month. I would have written the Hulk, and then I'd be listed as, you know, instead of one of the creators, I'd be a major creator. But I'm not. I share that with these other gentlemen, including Herb Trimby, the original artist. So we all did it together, and then Chris Claremont came along and really did the great work of making one of the great characters in the Disney comics. But anyway, those are two. Well, I had the Vision, and I'm really proud of the Vision and Ultron, who I made up in the same issue of the Avengers. I'm kind of happy with them. Of course, there's about 7 years in between when I met him and became editor-in-chief, but Stan was the best boss I ever had. That's not saying like I had some bad bosses, but Stan was really great. I mean, you know, we had our fights and different things, but I was just in awe of him because he was this guy who really knew what he wanted to do. I mean, he knew he had the best artists for superheroes in the world. He had Steve Ditko at that time still. He had Jack Kirby, who was the Alzheimer's patient, right? He had, John Romita came back about 2 weeks after I got to work, and John Romita walked in the door. I knew when I was a kid, he had drawn Captain America. A few weeks later, Bill Everett, the creator of the Submariner, walked in the door and I met him. These guys practically fainted when I told them how much I liked their whole work. They didn't think anyone would remember it from 10 years ago. And, it's just wonderful to work with all these people. Stan would have me in there every day, standing on his left while the production manager was on his right, going over all the changes he wanted in the work. It was really like taking a crash course in going to write and edit comics because Stan would make sure I knew why he wrote what he wrote. He'd say, I spent an hour going over this wonderful word design. I must be crazy. He told me once, probably. And I'll tell you a funny story. I hope. In November of 1965, a few months after I went to work there, they had a blackout in New York, a sudden blackout at 5:30. I was caught in the subway, and couldn't, the whole city was in darkness, So, once we got out of the subway, about 2 or 3 hours later, I and a friend or two and we just went out to a restaurant, we had some candles. I remember eating rice pudding and silly things, just sitting there talking. I had some comic writing to do, but I knew I couldn't do that night. So the next day, I go in, the electricity's finally starting to come back on everywhere. I have to walk 60 blocks up to where, Madison Avenue, where Marvel was, and I'm empty-handed because I couldn't write last night. Stan walks in, he's got a bunch of pages under his arm. It's a whole issue of, I think it was a Daredevil comic. He had done the dialogue for the entire 20 pages. And he said, there was this blackout, but my wife and I got a candle brigade. We set up a bunch of candles, and Stan in his 2 fingers typing, just stood there and typing away. And he said he was also supposed to have written the Sergeant Fury comic that night, but he said, it was a little slow with the candles and everything, so he just, and that's how I became the writer of Sergeant Fury. He says, you're now the Sergeant Fury writer. So that's how I got my first real monthly assignment. But nothing stopped that guy. He was just the best. Between him and Jack Kirby, they changed comics, forever. A lot of what's going on today is still a result of what Stan and Jack and Steve in particular did back in the 60s. So I was always working with an artist. I was working with John Buscema, Sound Buscema, or Gene Colan, or somebody else. So, and in the case of like Ghost Rider, that was really my friend Gary Friedrich's idea. He came with his idea that he didn't like that name Ghost Rider for the old Western character. He said that, but he wanted to have a motorcycle rider called Ghost Rider. And I said, and he was going to be what he was going to do? He was going to be an enemy of Daredevil. He wouldn't have been supernatural. He would have just been an enemy of Daredevil, like all other enemies of Daredevil. And I said, this is too good an idea to make him a villain. So we went right into see Stan, and by the time the three of us kicked him around a lot, he came out as a supernatural character in his own book. But without Gary, that wouldn't have existed. And then, of course, Mike Blue did the artwork. I helped design the costumes, forward along, so I'm sort of a co-creator, but it was really Gary and Mike that did the heavy lifting and that other character I was the main person, because we were a team. Like with Luke Cage, Stan wanted to do that character, and he led the discussion. I came up with the name Cage, Hero for Hire, and that kind of bulletproof, the bullets were big welts on it, and a couple of other things. Archie Goodwin was there, and he became the first writer. So we all had a hand in it. Sometimes it was one guy, sometimes it was 3 or 4 guys. It was a joint enterprise, and we just created it together.
Se você gostou desse vídeo, não esquece também de conferir minha cobertura completa da CCXP que eu vou deixar aqui na tela para vocês. Valeu, um grande beijo e até a próxima!